ladies and gentlemen, one and all, and welcome to this, the 11th ordinary meeting of the 176th session and the 7th special meeting of the 169th session of the Queen's University of Belfast Literary and Scientific Society! Wow, what an exciting bunch we have this evening! I am very pleased to announce that the dictatorial tyrant, Mr. Dermot Hamill, HLM, has been deposed for one night only. And like Nosferatu himself, someone was foolish enough to let me in the door, and now I cannot be stopped and shall rise to power and immortality unless something goes terribly wrong at the end of the evening. Who's to say? Sure. So, thank you very much for turning out on this cold, wet and windy December evening to the final debate of the first semester, the 176th session. It's sure to be a good one, but we will get on to that in due course. As you will hopefully see from your order papers in front of you, we have a few items of business to run through, and unlike how it has been done for the past number of weeks under 176 rules, we'll be doing 169 rules. So, first item of business this evening is announcements. Now, I don't know anything, so I will pass this over to the current council. Current council, do you have any announcements? Mr. President.
Mr. Hamill, President. I'm going to be returning in due course. First of all, announcement on external business. We have had 3 speakers through to the Irish Times semi-finals in the formal tea in Warren Lafferty and Alex Mullen, and Henry O'Riordan as an individual. Very well done to them. And as is weekly tradition, we shall be heading to Lafferty's after the debate.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Do any other council members? Yes, Mr. Turner.
Yes, we have my big day, which is the internal meeting, my very, very special day where I get to be slightly more in charge than usual. To decide the spring term card, which is going to be on Tuesday the 10th of December in the PFC. It's at 6:30, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that's when the room's been booked. So that's when everyone can come and pile in, and the masses can decide what will be our term card for next semester. So that's the debate that we'll be having for spring 2025. You can also add suggestions. There's a link in all of our kind of social media bios to add your suggestions to the motion which we discussed on the night. So you submit those anonymously, and then that's what's up to be discussed on Tuesday. So that's the way it works. But please, as many as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Internal Convener. Any other council announcements? Any other council members here? Mr. President again. Hello.
I'm on my absent events officer cap. We have Stephen Flynn, leader of the Scottish National Party in the House of Commons, making this next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. He will be interviewed by the BBC's Claire Dixon.
Monday. Next Monday. Very good. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? Gone. Okay. I would also, before we move on to the minutes, as per 169 House rules, I didn't want to interrupt, but if you are addressing the House this evening, please rise to your feet. If you don't, I will interrupt you and tell you to rise to your feet. So, yes, moving on then. Announcements done. I now would like to invite Mr. Secretary to read the minutes of the last meeting.
I would just like to clarify that I have not read over these in any form. Alicia Ciara is wholly responsible for everything that's in these minutes except the corrected grammar. On Thursday the 20th of November 2024, the Queen's University of Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 10th ordinary meeting of the 176th session to debate the motion, "This House would abolish the triple lock on Irish neutrality." I was at a meeting of unionism, so Misha read the seemingly endless minutes instead. We then moved to private members' business. Tom Burns, HLM, forgot his HLM, asked the House about the Australian Senate banning social media for under 16s. Hussein Badr replied by raising issues of implementing this in practicality. Henry O'Riordan asked the House about the Irish general election and asked who to vote for, although it should be fairly obvious given your predilections. Dermot Mooney swore. Beth replied as a fellow Southerner. Hussein Badr then asked Trump cabinet pick WWE co-founder Linda McMahon. Ryan Hoey, forgot the HLM, replied and spoke for a while. My goodness. Henry O'Riordan asked asked Ryan for his thoughts on the Big Bad Wolf. Ryan had children's books explained to him by Ray Fiennes. Well, clearly hasn't read Letters of Liberty. Daniel Leveni said something. And then moved to President's questions. Ray Fiennes asked Dermot if he liked his haircut. No answer. Dermot said he did because the man was a foreigner and because he was a foreigner, and it only cost him a tenner, much like an average night of Grindr for Dermot. Ryan HLM asked Dermot to announce the lit talk as our events officer had failed us. Tom Burns HLM asked how many times Dermot was planning to vote in the Irish election. Dermot outlined a lengthy bus Daniel Deveni, just his name. Sam Hazelett commiserated the return of Dermot's moustache. James Turge asked what the president had for breakfast. You heard the same answers given every time, saying spicy noodles and a cigarette, although strange combination together. A vote of prior opinion was then called with 8 votes for the proposition, 7 for the opposition, 10 abstentions. Thus the vote was carried. First on the proposition was Tom Burns with now HLM. Tom Burns approached the lectern with the grace of a lion and the energy of an unbridled stallion. His mustard woolen jumper clinging to his shoulders in a way that suggested it too, like me, had fallen under his spell. As his smouldering gaze locked with mine, I momentarily forgot the motion at hand, lost in his eyes. Dermot muttered something about focusing, but honestly, who could? It was no easy task for me. Tom went on to lay bare the inadequacies of the Triple Law, asserting that it hinders Ireland's sovereignty far more than it safeguards its neutrality. Launching into his argument with the same vigour he presumably reserves for book club, he proposed instead an enticing alternative, a double law. He masterfully traced the images of Irish neutrality, every historical deviation listed with precision, his passion for the subject making it impossible to look away. Criticised the UN's influence, dismissing the notion that Ireland's neutrality should be subject to the whims of global powers such as Russia, China, or for Jack Murray, the United Kingdom. As he concluded, he declared with a conviction that sent shivers down my spine, Ireland's neutrality is only meaningful if it stems from true independence. The Triple Law, he argued, doesn't protect neutrality, it neuters it. I was spellbound, wrote the deputising secretary, not me, lost in his eyes, and though he may not have gone on to win the vote of speaker ability, he had certainly won my heart. Thank you. That is finally over. We then moved to the first speaker of the opposition was Beth Lynham, who Misha has written with a lot more grace. She outlined the proud history of Irish neutrality. It's a strange thing to be proud of. Reiterated definition and recognising that not everyone in the room is from the Republic. Thankfully, Godwin's Law, Hitler mentioned. Spoke about Irish peacekeeping missions and the importance of being a mediator, asked how working with military organisations was any different from working for them. We might as well join NATO, she said. To compare Ireland's situation to that of Switzerland, although one is significantly worse than the other, and emphasised that Ireland needs to invest far more in its military. Second prop speaker on the proposition was James Turish, who challenged the wording of the motion, announced his unique perspective as someone about to join the reserves. This motion has the potential for very real consequences for him, as he could find himself in the Golan Heights. Emphasised that this debate was about whether or not such nations as Russia or China should have the power to veto when it comes to Irish troops. The history of Irish defence, he said, is one we should be proud of. I'm certainly not, but he might be. And he then agreed with Tom's proposal of a double law being sufficient and implored us to support the proposition. Second in the opposition was guest speaker Derek Mooney. Thanked the House for the opportunity to act as Dermot Hamill's support act, as though Dermot needs a support act, and said that it is nonsense to say that this is not an expression of our defence policy. What we have, buggered up, in quotations, is our defence spending and the cutting of defence forces. I couldn't understand his accent, Misha admitted, and he did an impersonation of someone with an even more unintelligible accent. He has been to Lebanon, he has been to Bosnia, he's been everywhere. We've built an orphanage, he said, strangely. We have the best equipment. NATO would have to have a hole in their head to accept us. Right, any discussion on the Triple Lock is purely academic for now. Third on the proposition was our dear Daniel Deveni, who said that unlike the Irish soldiers at the centre of this debate, he has been drafted in last minute. I told him to say that, he was quite nervous. 3 words, unready, unprepared, unwise, sums up Dermot's presidency thus far. He then said something, following on about Dermot's appearance, said something about dog collars, which Misha has then said, keep it for the bedroom, Deveni. from issues. He said that there's so much more potential than just seemingly move back to peacekeeping with the United Nations. No new peacekeeping missions approved for over a decade. Give alternatives to the triple log that doesn't necessitate the undermining of their own sovereignty. He held up his keys to mime unlocking the triple log. During the opposition was Henry O'Riordan, who said something was a very, very bad thing. He then quoted the Irish Times polls overwhelmingly in favour of Ireland's current means of maintaining neutrality. He said it was Ireland's right to protect itself from itself, which it hasn't done a very good job. Claimed the we didn't say that, Henry, don't worry. That was me. Claimed the proposition had mischaracterised neutrality as zero-sum. He brought up BDS groups lobbying government because of their involvement in the Israeli-Gaza conflict. We wouldn't just have some drops of blood on our hands if we abolished the triple lock. He said we would have leaders. Every Taoiseach has probably prayed for a war of epic proportions. Derek Mooney put his head in his hands at this point and said, "Oh Christ." He then finished off with a brief history of the entire Yugoslavian conflict. We then moved to question time. For the question was asked by Ryan Hoey and replied to by James Church. For the op, Derek Mooney replied on behalf. For the opposition, a question was asked. The House was, but Misha has added strangely here, the House was too scared of Derek Mooney at this point. So the abstaining question was Sam, who asked what both sides of the House thought of the capabilities of the IDF. In brackets, Irish, not Israel, close brackets. To respond on the proposition was Tom Burns, and the opposition was Derek Mooney, who said he doesn't fetishise the triple lock. And then a vote of speaker ability was called with 8 votes for the proposition, 16 for the opposition, and 3 for abstaining votes. Thus, the opposition carried the vote of speaker ability. Can I please take these unholy, vulgar, and detestable minutes as read forever?
Mr. Secretary and Miss Deputised Secretary for some very humorous and well-delivered minutes. Moving on then, the next item of business is private members' business. This, for those of you who, I imagine some of you diehards here this evening, but for those who might not know, is when you can raise a mini motion to be discussed by the House on whatever you've seen in the news this week or just whatever you're feeling like at this moment in time. Do we have any items of private members' business? I will go with... You spoke to me before, so you get to go first. Please rise and state your name for the minutes.
My name is Christopher Kieran. Yes, I hear those snaggers.
Excellent.
Thank you. One topic I would love to be discussed is the politically correct name of the assisted dying bill that was discussed in House of Commons on Friday. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. That's all.
Very good. Do we have any thoughts on that anyone would like to share? A very delicate topic, but a very nuanced one and interesting one. I will go to Mr. Hoey, please.
I guess I've talked about this a few weeks ago when it was raised, but I should declare interest as someone who works for a charity that's involved in end-of-life care and also maintains a neutral stance on it. I'm personally against the bill and was disappointed that it went through. I think the main problem is that the whole argument in favour of assisted dying is that it's choice, but at the moment about 1 in 4 people don't get the care and support they need at the end of their life, which means for those 1 in 4 people it's not a choice at all, because they can be forced basically into going through with assisted suicide because they're not getting the care that they need, so they're in huge amounts of pain when they ought not to be if they got the care that they needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoey. Any follow-up? Yes, Mr. President.
President Dermot as well. I think Ryan's biggest opposition doesn't really come from that place. I think it actually comes from Ryan's fear of Canada, where people at Ryan's age are quite often sent to die. So Ryan knows that us and the other efforts will not let them come for you first, but we will stand with you in your old age.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Any additional... No? Not any more? No? Change your mind? Okay. If there's no further points then on the assisted dying bill, we'll move on. Are there any additional private members' business? I did start to point to you, so it would be unfair to go elsewhere. Mr. Burns, please rise.
Be careful here. One of the most interesting events I've ever seen in international politics happened this week, in which martial law was declared in South Korea, and then undeclared through the greatest act of liberal democracy the world has ever seen. But and or here.
Thank you very much. Yes, if anybody has any insider knowledge of what happened, that would be very welcome this evening. Sir, please rise and give your name for the minutes.
Same for the minutes. I believe I read something in the news that allegedly the president declared martial law in part because he was, quote, lonely and, quote, needed a friend to talk to.
That was Mr. Say My Name for the minutes there, apparently. Very clever. You won't be getting called on again this evening. Anybody else on the South Korean oddity? Sir, yes, Mr. External Communicator.
John from the Massey for the minutes. I thought it was interesting that if we all had a penny for every government that was toppled on December 4th, we'd have 2 pennies. The French government also. And so, whilst that isn't many pennies, I think the House can appreciate it's strange that it happened twice.
Sir.
Once again, Christopher Cartwright for the minutes. I did read somewhere that upon the martial law being declared and then undeclared a bit over 2 hours later, that it was apparently declared due to I don't know, the president having a schizophrenic episode of believing North Korea was invading. That's all.
That's what we like in this chamber. Speculation and rapid hearsay. Anybody else? Yes, Madam Schools Cleaner, I believe it's called now.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, that's Mr. President.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Great theme, like you guys told that. Anyways, sorry.
Doctor was new.
So apparently he declared martial law because one, he was not in scandals before. There's like the Gucci handbag scandal where his wife got like a $2,000 Gucci handbag, like spent like government funds on it. But then there's also like, oh, now he's calling the left like one of Korean sympathizers. So that's probably cool. But anyways, my dad doesn't know anything. Despite him being security in the area. Anyways, this is me.
Well, that's not at all a concerning thought for all of us to say. Final 2 then. Hang on. Do you want to comment on the South Korea?
Oh, no.
Okay. Final 2 on South Korea? Yes, South Korea. Mr. President, you go first.
Don't know I think it's important to know that if anybody decides to date me, I too will spend horrific money on Gucci handbags.
Mr. Steele.
Any Gucci handbags, but so if anybody would like a Gucci handbag or a gavel, we'll find my Snapchat.
Mr. Steele, you say no one will take the president up on that offer, but I will note that this debate is being recorded. There is a small, but possible chance that Keir Starmer will hear this and it will be all over Mr. Hamill. Mr. Hoy finishes off on the South Korea debacle.
Yes, well, this is a very good note to end on this one. My favourite thing about this whole episode was a tweet that I saw on X, I guess it's called now. And it was someone who had a friend in South Korea and they messaged their friend saying, "What's going on in South Korea?" To which they responded, "Don't know, playing League of Legends." Like, yeah, but what's going on? It was like League of Legends. So that was the whole encounter.
Nice. On that much cheerer note, any more private members' business? You, sir, you've been waiting. State your name for the minutes.
Jack Douglas. I think of 2 things, a serious one and an unserious one. Can I do both?
You can try.
Okay, we will begin with the unserious one then. Some people may have noticed in the last 2 weeks that Subway, nearly all the franchises seem to have switched from the proper soda, Pepsi, and are now only carrying whatever this bullshit.
Is that a swear? That would be a fine, sir.
Oh yes, the bottle of gold. And I wonder if House has any thoughts on this terrible business decision. And on the, I'll just say.
I will call you again. We'll do the round of response to that now.
Okay, sorry.
Which you're a special lines for that. This Swail, please rise.
Yeah. So my name's Ciara Swail. Basically, I don't know what it is about Pepsi because I like it alone and I like Coke Zero alone. flavour of alcohol to any Pepsi, it just goes flat as anything, and I hate it. I don't know why it does it, but it doesn't do it with Coke. Lord knows why. That's just a thing I weirdly noticed about Pepsi the other day.
Top tip for the sesh after the end. I will go to you, sir. Please sit your name for the minutes.
Hugh Child for the minutes. I'd just like to speak formally in proposition of the Pepsi Party.
Excellent stuff. I will go to you, sir.
Jack Murray, I'm actually extremely happy that now Pepsi is gone from Subway. Absolutely disgusting drink. Now, after the results of the Irish election, it's good to see something good finally happening in the Irish Parliament.
Sir, I saw a fist pump. You haven't dared yourself to me. If you want to, you did put your hand up before. No, you can change your mind. Yes, Miss Lynn.
So, just on concept ways, you know that a woman found a Kieran tooth in her Subway sandwich?
Oh, that's the one I just went to. Thank you for informing me.
May we please at least have a believable fake name for the minute, sir?
Just saying there. That is my real name. I didn't know what you're trying to.
I don't believe you, so I
Would you rather it was a non-human tooth?
Yes, Mr. Kieran.
Yes, Max Kieran for the minutes, Chair. Style. First off, I would like to say my condolences. And second of all, I wish to say that I fear that my brand endorsement with Pepsi is in danger now due to the change.
I couldn't possibly comment on that, but could well be. You both have spoken quite a bit already, so I will move on. You had a serious bit of private members' business?
Don't know if any of us have seen the chief executive of the healthcare company in New York who was shot. Just how House has any thoughts about what this says about the state of the healthcare system in the US? Because it seems that the person who assassinated them had various cryptic messages written on their bullets, which suggests a very personal, intense motive. So I wonder if this says anything about the state of the health system.
Thank you very much. I would also add to that, I only saw this headline when it happened last night and haven't looked at the news today, so if anybody would like to give more details, that would be appreciated by me. I will go to you, sir, again.
Huge for the minutes again. The healthcare company was United Healthcare, which is known in the United States for being the one with the most denied insurance requests. And also the words that were engraved on the bullet casings were the 3 words for a book about insurance companies denying claims for profit. So there's very obvious motive for the whole thing.
Thank you, sir. I'll go to Mr. President.
Anyone decides to collect me up, very words writer on that point. But on the words that were denied, depose, and was it defend, because it was in relation to if someone had a claim for insurance, they would initially deny it, then they would, whenever it came to going to a legal case, they would defend their decision no matter what, and then they had the habit of putting people who were on their deathbeds and deposing them for the legal case. So it was kind of, I don't think it was entirely personal, but it seemed to have been an attack on their overall system. But please don't back me up on a general point.
I will be drawing private members' business to a close soon, but I will take, yes, you 3 will ask to speak on this bit. I will go for Mr. Hoey first.
Yeah, I think the point about, so I think, what was the name of the company? United Health? I think the average denial rate for insurance claims in America is about 14%, and they have a denial rate of about 32%. So I don't know whether the person, well, we don't know who did it because they seem to get away with it for now anyway, might have had an experience of a denied coverage. But even if that was the case, murdering people is bad. Yeah. So I've seen lots of justification online for it.
You're so brave, Mr. Hoey. To stand up and say murder is bad. I don't know where you find the courage. Sir?
Once more, Christopher Kirkbride for minutes. Apparently, Liberty Life Insurance personally provided life insurance to the CEO. Rejected his life insurance claim, ironically. That's all.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Ms. Swail.
Right, my name's Swail for the minutes. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying this is not me supporting murder. However,
go on.
What I am going to say, I am speaking as someone who has had chronic pain since the age of 15. So I have chronic pain since the age of 15. I've had various maladies because of it. I have been greatly restricted in my life. And basically, I have been tossed around healthcare providers basically most of my life because nobody knew what was going on. And when that happens, you get you get emotional, you are greatly restricted in your life, and quite blunt, it's a miserable time. So I find it absolutely deplorable and heartbreaking that essentially in the US there is this system of deny as many claims as possible or try not to have any claims go through or to make basic healthcare as complicated as possible just to make sure that people can make a profit when at the end of the day it affects people to a horrific degree, potentially for, in my case, 10 years. So yeah, it's awful. And basically when you're grown up, get a job with private health insurance and you'll actually get treated. It's awful. Anyway, go on.
Thank you for that, Ms. Swail. Unless anybody really wants to try and catch my eye with a very enthusiastic arm wave for a final bit of private members business. No, denied. I apologise. We do have to move on. I would do this all night, but I think I might be tackled to the floor at some point, so to continue on. We will move on to a brief, at most 5-minute round of President's Questions. Does anybody have any questions for whichever President you care to address? There are 3 in the room this evening. Yes, Mr. Stern.
The House has suffered for years from presidents who don't eat the meal that is the most important one of the day. And so I would like to ask the President, what did he have for breakfast?
I don't think this is going to change, not just memories are me correctly.
My dad has changed in the past 7 years. So here's the thing. This question has been asked at the Liturgic at basically every meeting for the last at least 11 years. It is the meme that will not die. So I knew that I was going to be asked this evening, and so I had intended to set out and get a hearty breakfast. I thought a good traditional Ulster fry would be an inspired choice. Unfortunately, however, I was unable to do so, and as such, my breakfast, and indeed my entire diet for today, has consisted of a single 150ml can of Red Bull.
It's not so fucking easy.
So yeah, that's not great. But I'm caffeinated, and that's all that really matters. Sir.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Sorry. Can you read?
Yes, I can read.
Can you say the name that's on this, please?
Is this so I can? Oh, okay. Yes. Hussein Ahmed Badir?
Yes. Can you confirm that is me in that photograph?
Mr. Guest President, normally you only let up one question.
That is.
I'm defending my honor.
I am merciful, but also vengeful. And the mistake that Mr. Hussein Ahmed Badir, if that is your real name, is that he's given me his government ID. Moving on. Any other questions? Miss Interpreter meeting.
On that note, how did power go to your head?
The power never left my head. You're all fired. Sir, yes. And then you next.
To Mr. Dermot Hamill, HLM.
President, Mr. Dermot Hamill, HLM.
Yes. Whatever specifics you prefer. I believe it is a great importance for the House to learn about what you were doing last night.
episode last night.
Oh, that should be good.
Do we need to hear about this?
This sounds like a great place. What do you think of it? I think we sat last night and we watched House MD for a solid 2 hours.
Ooh.
Discovery Speaks Mandarin, which was the most kind of popular.
That's a day true.
And then. I think I drank like 8 bottles of Peroni.
Was that the answer you were looking for, sir?
Not technically, but I'll take it.
Okay. Sir, did you have one?
Including Legion, not HLM. Could we get Mrs. Ciara to recommend this more often?
Is that, sir, would you like to propose that to the House as a motion?
I will.
Sir, would you like to propose that to the Can I get a seconder for that motion? Okay, the motion of the House then is that Mr. Ard, General Convener, would write the minutes more often. We will be vague and not define what more often means. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those against, say nay. We'll say that's actually all those abstaining say nay. No one did. The motion is clearly carried on a voice vote. Thank you very much. I will leave that to the council to enforce at their discretion. Any other president's questions? Sir, and then one more, then we're done.
The same day. Given 6 months and unlimited funding, do you think you could train a silverback gorilla to beat a grizzly bear in a fight? Note, you cannot give it any anabolic steroids.
Well, what's even the point if you can't give it steroids? Yes, that might technically be cheating under some people's definitions, but that's where the fun is.
You could use catabolics.
Yes, which didn't really do very much. It just did the cocaine and then flopped over dead, basically, but it's alright. Are there any further questions? Oh, what's this? There is. Yes, there's a question to that president sitting there. Mr. President, correct me if I'm wrong, a simple yes, no will do. Your second HLM is because one of the southern debating societies give you an HLM, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. As you will notice, if you all turn your hymnals to the other side, I have only affixed a single HLM to Mr. Hamill's name because this House does not recognise the authority of southern debating societies. Why are there so many questions, sir? Make it quick.
2 governments were collapsed over the previous week. If you could collapse the third, which one would it
Mr. President, Dermot,
I do have a political impartiality, but I think we all know which government I would collapse. I won't comment, of course.
Mr. Guest President, many have tried, many have failed.
There's still time, sir. Anything? So you're very enthusiastic?
Yes. I believe I heard that you swear. Will you oppose a fine upon yourself?
I did not swear. What do you think?
Nail.
Unless
I'm going down.
You did not, sir. Take your seat. Hi, there. Last one.
I'm going to do that, please.
Okay, so we now move to the vote on prior opinion. Now, slight thing about this. Obviously, there's another vote later on. Typically speaking, this would be restricted to members of the society. And in order to prove your membership, you would have to produce a membership card. I don't believe that is the case this year. So could I ask all paid up members of the society to rise to their feet now, please? And remain standing, please. Excellent. There's a membership card for you. 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 Have mercy on each family. Writing down for his to sign all these afterwards. Okay, is everybody who's a paid up member in receipt of a membership card? Excellent. As I said, Mr. Hamill will need to sign all of those. Okay, I have some notes I do. These are white and they're slightly slightly dry. They're just perfectly right, but they look really cool on the card. Yeah, look at that. So there we go. I may, much like with the order papers, I may possibly have had too many of these made. What's the guy today? So, the motion this evening is: this House supports government intervention to ban books in schools. This is the vote on prior opinion. Could all those who would like to vote in favour of the motion please raise their membership cards and say aye? And keep them raised so we can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got it. Here's the... Okay. 9, very good, sir. Could all those who would like to vote against the motion please raise their membership cards and say nay? Nay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9? And would all those who would like to abstain on the motion please raise their membership cards and say meh? Nah. 2, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, could you please read back the vote on prior opinion?
There were 9 votes for the opposition, 9 votes for the opposition, and 2 for abstaining. That's the, well, I guess verbally the opposition that carried the vote.
Oh, interesting. A tie. I look very much forward to seeing how the votes will shift over the course of the evening. So, without further ado, I will simply kind of like hide these away in here and get them at the end. I would now like to invite to open the motion for this evening, President Emeritus of the 173rd and 4th session? 4th and 5th session, Ms. Tasha McSparron, HLM!
Good evening, members of the House. I would like to start by saying that much like an English degree, the opposition have the easier side of this debate. On my last day of secondary school, my principal gifted me a book of poems about sex. For context, this is because 2 years before, I had been asked by my school to represent the English department at a poetry evening in St. Dominic's, which I didn't go to. I went to Dominican college, but they were like, oh, get all the Dominican girls together, and then we'll get a Dominican guest poet in, and it'll be one big Dominican party where we all read really boring poems for 2 hours. And my principal, to thank me, told me to go buy the guest of honours poetry book that she had selling at the event, and I bought it and got it signed, and I went over to show the book to my principal, and she just looked at it and went, that's a lot of naked people on the cover of the book. So she took the book off me and said she was going to show it to my English teacher and that she'd give it back to me, but I did not see the book for 2 years until the very last day of school when everyone said the principal was looking for me, and I went to find her and she just said, you're old enough now, and gives me the book. And I would like to say I would rather she had just burnt it. Not only did by association it take my very last day of school, but now I know what the phrase nipple wart means. The proposition tonight would like to start by saying that banning books in schools does not have to lead to censorship or restrictions on freedom. Governmental banning books in schools is simply a way to shape our schools' libraries, curriculums and classrooms to be an appropriate and effective tool to educate children. It allows for schools to have a standardised curriculum that cultivates educated children with the tools to one day enter adulthood and access these books. These books are not banned for life, they are not banned from universities or the home, they are simply banned from children while in school. And throughout my debate, I will demonstrate why this is a positive by looking at how literature shouldn't be held on a pedestal. Democratisation of knowledge has been shown not to work, and that allowing children access to banned texts will only lead to confusion. First of all, I would like to contextualise banning books in schools by looking at what else children cannot do. You cannot vote until you're 18. You cannot drink alcohol until you're 18. You wouldn't let a child into a theatre if the play had adult themes, or cinema if the movie was R-rated. A lot of parents don't even let their children listen to music if there are swear words in it. We do this because children are not ready to do these things yet. Children are not mature enough to drink, to make their own decisions about political parties, or to vote, or to know when it is appropriate to use certain words or phrases they hear in songs. Just take Dermot Hamill, for instance. When he was a child, he supported the SDLP. So why is it that the opposition are attempting to... Yeah, go ahead.
What happens when the government decides that the children shouldn't be exposed to LGBT themes, for example?
But that's not what's happening. Like, I did an English degree, and I read books in schools. That's not what's happening. I'm saying that, you know, books that can be actually harmful to children, that, you know, have propaganda in them and things like that, that is what we should restrict children from reading. So why is it that the opposition are attempting to place the written word on some sort of pedestal, when we know it is still an extremely effective way to convey ideas, images, and influences on a person's mind? At the end of the day, you wouldn't let a child stroll into a cinema and watch 50 Shades of Grey, so why would you let them read the book if it has the same effect on the child's mind? Something being written down... No, thank you. Something being written down in prose or poetry does not suddenly make it educational or appropriate. So why are we not holding books up to the same standards as cinema, theatre, and politics? Government intervention to ban books in schools is the same as not letting a child watch that movie rated 18. It is not some sort of oppressive regime that restricts freedom. Go ahead.
Once more. On that point, if legislation is entered into House of Commons and voted upon and it is agreed upon to be put into law, how do we know that further on down the line, the House of Commons, say, by the unfortunate attempts of Reform UK yet in power, I know it's horrifying for us all. How do we know that that legislation will be changed to include LGBTQ themes?
See, I just don't think that's what's happening in the government, and like this whole slippery slope of like one day maybe some oppressive regime will come along and then they'll take away all the LGBT media. I don't actually think that's going to happen. I think if anything our government's becoming more liberal, and the books that they teach in schools are reflecting that, and same in universities, because I've done GCSE English, A-level English degree. It's getting more progressive, it's not going backwards. Yeah.
On that point?
No, thank you. I would like to say to the opposition that I personally agree with you on some level. I wish there was a world where all knowledge and books were freely available to everyone, and we could go into school, read whatever we wanted, and all become the most intelligent and brilliant students there are known to man. But this is a fantasy that can never happen. And I know this because we have already attempted it, and it is known as the internet. This limitless access to knowledge was supposed to democratize our population, but it instead led to more misinformation, more propaganda, and more radicalization. Even though knowledge is more accessible than ever, fake news, conspiracy theories, and pseudoscience often gain as much, if not more, attention than credible information. The internet was meant to bring about freedom of thought, but it just ended up bringing about less. The same will happen if we allow children limitless access to books in schools. In fact, the proposition argued that it would be have an even more adverse effect on our population, because at least children on the internet have some media literacy and can recognise clickbait and not to trust everything they see because of the rise of things like AI. But a child does not expect this when they walk into their school library. They expect instead to be learning facts and not be thinking, does Miles' little red book maybe want to radicalise me? I'm sure that the opposition will claim that people supporting banning books is mostly to the benefit of the right, but actually having a ban on books benefits the left as well, because children simply don't have the analytical skills to always recognise propaganda from the right or the left. It wasn't until I started doing my English degree that we started to analyse texts from racist perspectives, or texts that said the Irish were closer to monkeys than humans, because even at GCSE or A-level, students may find it difficult to completely understand and piece apart these texts in an educational and fulfilling way. There is a reason that when children start analysing texts, they start with comprehensions that ask you, what is the symbolism of this rainbow? And it's because that is easy for a child to understand. They first have to get a grip on the basics before tackling possibly harmful texts. To conclude, the opposition does not have to be like my principal, who tainted my school experience by giving me a book of poems about sex, signed for Tailte. We can instead agree that government intervention to ban books in schools is overall positive, as it allows for a standardised curriculum that educates pupils. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. And now to open the case for the opposition, I would invite Mr. Kieran to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Guest President. And might I first begin by saying I am taking, as my colleague Tolsha said, Ed, the hardest position of this debate by arguing that, in fact, book good. I wish to first address the point made by the opening proposition by talking about what schools are meant to be. Schools are meant to be a controlled learning environment
in which we teach our younger generation about skills that will apply later in life. Now, the proposition has already outlined to us today that they seemingly believe that media literacy is a switch that switches on at 18, but we believe on our side that instead media literacy is a skill that is built over addressing controversial texts and skills, talking about these hard points, and dealing with them at the time in the best possible environment. We personally disagree with the conflation between the internet and schools, because the internet is the ultimate uncontrollable environment. You can't tell what information they're going to be given, you're not sure that they're going to be given the proper criticisms, the proper advantages, disadvantages, and there's no way to tell what the outcome will be. In a school, you can make sure with the curriculum that you outlined at the end of your speech, what the children discussed, make sure that there's a proper discussion about it, and to make sure proper conclusions are drawn. For example, I'd like to point out a controversial book that will likely fall under this. Mein Kampf, which is the book written by one Mr. Adolf Hitler. Now, the fact of the matter is, I will come to that maybe later. The problem is that we would consider that a controversial book. It's the arguments and philosophy of one person, and who genocided quite a few million people. The thing is, if we did discuss it, one point would be very clear. The grammar is horrible, it's written terribly, it makes no sense, and it's one of the biggest facts that you can disagree with the Nazi ideology. By discussing it in, say, films such as Jojo Rabbit and making fun of it, you could see from that aspect that the Nazi ideology and that sort of aspect loses power. And in the same way, whenever we can point out the inherent criticisms, contradictions, and flaws within that ideology, within an educational setting, and discuss it with children, we believe on the opposition side that we would actually have a decrease in the amount of radicalization of young people.
On that point?
Yes.
So you wouldn't oppose banning Mein Kampf in schools for children?
Yes, because if you think about it, when children are going to have access to this book, look, if you're going to say that a kid in primary school is going to have access to it and that's a horrifying thing, that's a very disingenuous argument. Because theoretically, a child can walk into a library, regardless of whether it's banned in the school, and pick up that book. That is a theoretical thing that has happened. I know because it happened to a friend of mine. And what happened was that they were sat down, given a proper discussion about how that was a book that they shouldn't be reading because, well, that they shouldn't agree with the philosophies in that book, and a description of why their parents thought that was wrong. And they treated them like a rational being. Now, I believe that the proposition is going to outline this as a case of parental choice, in that parents should be allowed to choose what their children do and don't talk about. I believe that this will be discussed later with my fellow colleagues on why that isn't entirely the case, and why we shouldn't put that as paramount above the child's desire to learn and educate themselves. Yes.
So, in my high school, a kid checked out Mein Kampf, and maybe a couple of months later, he committed a massacre instead of bomb. What would you say to that?
I would say, first of all, that that's a deeply harrowing event, and I'm very sorry to hear that happened. But what I would what I would point out there is that that was not him reading it in a school environment. That was him checking it. Oh, was it? Forgive me, but admittedly, you can't clarify the specifics, but the way it was described to me there in your question is that it was checked out of the school library, and that he then proceeded to commit that act of terror. What we're suggesting is that in a history class or an English class, having a discussion and analysis of that aspect to explain why that is not a good thing, and that that is an abhorrent act of terror. And I, again, reiterate my deep condolences for that.
Kieran, please contain yourself, madam. But give a man respect if they want to speak. I'm sure you have the strength of it up and withhold your laughter. Continue, sir.
And to discuss further what my colleagues are going to be saying. They'll complain about the fact that this is a slippery slope argument and that the UK government would never do anything to ban LGBT books. And yet they come in with the idea that they have to engage with the fact that we have to future-proof this law, future-proof our plans. We cannot assume that Reform UK, as the point of information speaker outlined earlier, will never get into office and use this to ban books that they deem worthy of children reading. We equally can't do it on the left and assume that they can, and we will not have a situation in the future. We need to think rationally and talk about the fact that school is the most controllable environment to teach these educational books, talk to them properly about the issues that they display, and talk about them in a proper, serious manner, not assuming that the child will eventually take it into their adult life and all of a sudden rationally be able to understand why it is good or bad. And at the end of the day, we believe in brass tacks that is the desired outcome of this House to teach these things in the most controllable environment possible, to discuss them with the greatest seriousness and ability to make sure that the outcome is the most desirable outcome possible. And by banning these books, we limit ourselves to being at the whims of uncontrollable environments such as the internet. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Kieran. I'd like to continue the case of proposition and like Mr. Jack Murray.
Good evening to everyone present here tonight. As per usual, it's an honour to be here, and I want to welcome the English Society to the debate here this evening. It's honestly great to have you here, even if you are on the wrong side. In every debate I do always try to stick to the facts and look at clear, objective reality. Most of all, I believe in common sense policy. I believe in doing what's reasonable. And the opposition here tonight outright disregard those beliefs I hold so dear. They have truly lost the plot on this issue. Obviously, there are some things and some books which are completely inappropriate for schools. Obviously, there are some things that should never be near children under any circumstances. So here's actually an example I found. This is a book called Welcome to Sex. This book contains information on anal sex, 6, 9 and so much more. This book is aimed at 12-year-olds. Let's be clear on that. This is not something that's to be found in schools. Schools are there to teach the biology of sex. It is up to the parents to decide at the age appropriate when to go into detail on these things. Because I'm sorry, it's simply disgusting to have discussions like that with children at that age. No, thank you. When did it become the job of the school to decide what's inappropriate for children? When did it become up to them to decide? As well as this, we see an increase in books of increasingly sexual nature being discussed with young children. It's simply unacceptable. Now, if anyone in the opposition here, by the way, is agreeing with me, good. Now get up off your seat and actually join us in this proposition. There are some things that are simply not okay to have in schools. And so I actually asked the opposition, quite simply, where do you draw the line?
On that point?
Go ahead.
Would you rather have me as an 11-year-old find out about sex through porn and watching porn freely online, or reading an educational book about puberty? Please answer that question.
So would you rather learn about it as an 8-year-old as well? Would you just say, oh what, do we just let any 8-year-old learn about it because they can find it online? No, be responsible, be reasonable, honestly. Nowhere do you seem to draw the line. It's absolutely scandalous. It's completely unacceptable. Now, I actually want you to look me in the eye right now. I give you the chance right here. Justify yourselves. Tell me in what situation pornographic materials should be allowed in front of young children.
On that point,
go ahead.
Sex education classes.
Please listen to the words of young children. So, how many sex education classes are you going to give the 5-year-old?
Point forward.
I'm genuinely baffled how do you want sex education lessons for 5-year-olds? Go ahead. Do you want that?
Yes.
Yes. No. That's disgusting. That is actually disgusting. Genuinely disgusting. Actually have some shame in yourself. Honestly. Actually shame on every single one of you. Want to discuss that with 5-year-olds? wise up. It's actually very interesting how you don't actually seem to believe what you're saying. You don't actually have the guts to stand up and just say you're wrong. 3 simple words, we were wrong. That's all it takes. Now, I know the argument as well that you love to seem to make about important books that need to be read, books that are historic. No one on my side is saying ban all books. What we're saying is certain books need to be banned in schools. Because if you want to go and buy whatever books you want, be my guest, I welcome you to do so. But don't you even try to dare justify allowing certain books in the schools. Don't you dare try to make it seem okay. Because deciding what books should be allowed and shouldn't be allowed, it is a difficult decision. But because it's a difficult decision, the English society don't seem to want to take it. The English society only seems to care about sitting around in a circle and reading about the non-existent meaning of some book no one cares about. Or we letterific, like to look at facts and debate ideas that affect the real world. I've seen none of that from the English society this evening. It just goes in the complete...
As well, but I would ask you that you direct your criticisms to the opposition rather than the English society. Not necessarily representing the views of the English society, speaking for the opposition. Thank you, sir.
I understand, Mr. Acting President. But I've seen none of that from the opposition, who are made up mostly from the English society. Lack of grasp on reality just shows how out of touch they are with ordinary people. Because I'm sorry, when you look at the facts are clear. Parents don't want this. Facts don't care about your feelings. There are reasons there are safeguarding laws in place. There is a reason teachers are trained in child protection policy. But this opposition seems to say, well, the hell with that, let's let anything into our schools. Let's let teachers push whatever books they want in the classroom without considering safeguarding issues. Go ahead, sir.
Doesn't that mean that schools already have the ability to check what books children should be taught because they have the child safeguarding policies in place?
Yes, but the child safeguarding policies would then therefore be in relation to the book and government intervention in the book, because this all comes down from, I don't know if you're in England, then it would be Westminster, but in Northern Ireland, normally the Northern Ireland Executive and the Department of Education. That is government intervention in books, and so you actually seem to be supporting our motion, oddly enough. Now, 99% of teachers, by the way, are amazing. They would never dream of doing something like this. However, there is a reason we do have those laws in place. It's to protect children. Because there are some people out there, and we can all agree on this, they're truly evil, horrific individuals who we need to protect children from. And this is something we all need to look at together as a society and say, we need to protect children. Because what this opposition is promoting, it's dangerous. It's not a threat that should be took lightly. Endangering children is the clear policy of this opposition. No matter what way they try to spin it, I look at results, not intentions. All because you're very keen on something doesn't mean it will happen. Neville Chamberlain was very keen on peace, but the reality was Hitler disagreed. Well, I tell you this, under no circumstances will we ever accept what you want to push on the young children. So make sure you tell people what you're voting against. Make sure when people come and complain to you, you look them in the eye and you tell them you should have done more, but decided not to. So when we're looking at the motion, I hope it is abundantly clear to everyone today. Whenever you're making a decision, whatever it may be, don't feel pressured by the lies of this opposition. Don't feel pressured from their dishonesty. Whenever you're making up your mind, it really is as simple as right versus wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mark, for that. And continuing on to the opposition, the president of the English Society himself, Mr. Zach Savage.
Jack, I will have the courage to admit here. I am wrong. I'm wrong about many things in life. I'm not wrong about this, though. Fact of the matter is, the average age in the UK now of when children first access porn is 11 years old. There is, by that metric, not really anything you can do by not having books available in secondary schools where those children are already going to be at that age, where they will have access to that materials otherwise by other means. It is a better situation for them to get access to that material in a safe and responsible learning environment where they're not just looking up random stuff online. If, as you say, quote, facts don't care about your feelings, then it's very odd, I find, that you would try to censor established facts, like sex ed, for example. This is stuff that children have the right to have access to, frankly, because to pretend as if child sexual abuse does not exist in certain contexts, no thank you, is very much deeply wrong. Now, I'll move on to some of Talsh's points, because I think hers was frankly more reasonable. I'm sorry, Talsha, but banning books will result in further censorship. That's the whole point of a slippery slide argument. You might not like that that's the case, but this is exactly that sort of argument. You're not actually implementing or explaining how this as a policy would be implemented. You're just sort of dodging and obfuscating around, and I get that, because I wouldn't like to argue the policy on this either. You say that this is not what's happening, maybe not in the UK, maybe not in Northern Ireland, but it is absolutely happening in other countries. The US, for example, if we're going to go on to LGBT books, there's a very infamous example in, I believe, Texas, where a local school had a book about seahorses banned because it is a biological fact that male seahorses are the ones who get pregnant. And that was deemed as an LGBT issue. So given the state's law on banning LGBT texts in schools, that was abolished from the school library, which is, granted, an absurd example, but it happened. And this sort of stuff does happen in the world. All throughout history, very well-intentioned innocent books have been banned for political gain. To Kill a Mockingbird for its themes on segregation, Ulysses for its commentary on the Irish state. These books have been banned, and I would argue very wrongfully so. The definition of propaganda depends absolutely on who is in power and who decides what they want their citizens to access and not. And this is not a left or right issue. Both left and right-wing governments have banned books before. This is an authoritarian issue with legitimate concerns about free speech and access to these materials.
On that point,
Yes, please.
do you think there are any examples of restriction or banning of a book that was positive, or all banning? Is all banning of literature inherently bad?
I'm going to go no. Because frankly, there is no moderate or responsible way I've ever seen this carried out in a country where they take an objective look at books that, for reasons they might not want children to have access to. I would sort of disagree wholesale that there are books we should not let children have access to, because frankly, kids have the internet. You cannot stop kids in the 21st century from getting access to these materials. In fact, you very much risk a Streisand effect sort of deal, where if kids find out a book is banned for certain reasons, they are absolutely going to find out how to access that online or in public libraries. This stuff happens. And you don't then, if this is your argument, want to draw more attention to these books you think should be banned. The only way to effectively ban children getting access to these books is not to ban them in schools, it's to ban them in local libraries as well, which also happens in the US now. It's to ban them online. And you talk about the internet as this sort of libertarian wild rodeo that no one can touch on. Absolutely other countries have touched on these...
On that point?
In a second. Other countries have restricted access to these materials in Russia and China and Iran, and yes, the UK is very far away from that, but as we see in the US, it's very, there's a clear path towards this route that many countries are taking for Asian Reform UK. Yes, Telstra.
When it comes to film, The Song of the South and The Eternal Jew have been banned. Why don't we do that with books if it leads to a positive like it has with film?
And again, this sort of echoes back to Max's point. I think this is a great example of why we should actually be engaging with these materials and not just telling people these are wrong, don't look at these. We need people to understand why they're wrong. The Eternal Jew is an absolutely horrific film, I agree, but also banned, it's still available on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing right there. I know that for a fact because I have a kid in secondary school who tried to show me it on YouTube. Not friends with them anymore. But children absolutely get access to this stuff. And it is better overall, my belief, and the belief of the opposition, that children get access to these materials in a responsible, healthy learning environment. Yes.
Well, you then therefore seem to be agreeing with us. Let's be responsible. Let's make sure children are able to access the right books at the right time. Therefore, you have to ban or intervene certain books at certain ages that are clearly inappropriate. You're agreeing with us. You're not agreeing with your own side.
Jack, I agree with you to the extent that we want to handle this in a responsible way. We disagree on how we think the responsible way to deal with it is, but in a good faith, legitimate argument here, I don't believe your side is being malicious in this defense. I simply happen to have the view that, as you no doubt, evil individuals can do way worse things than show children books about sex ed. that's actually a very responsible thing I would find for an evil individual to do. At the end of the line, as a policy, the idea of banning books is dangerous and ineffective. And for those reasons alone, you can't argue why this is a better policy than just making sure children are exposed to this material and understand why it's wrong in cases or how it's meaningful for their development. And I yield my last 9 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savage. And now to close this proposition, it's Mr. President Dermot Hamill, XLM.
Alright, how are we all? A lot been said tonight, of varying value on both sides. I think quite quickly dealing with Max's kind of throwaway comment about the Holocaust in regards to a few million, 6 million people, Max, so maybe let's be more careful with our words here. There was a point consistently made about kind of pornography and the fact that kids cannot access pornography on the internet. And they can. When I was a young fella, I did too. I'll admit that. But on school computers, we had a state-run control over our internet access. There was filters in all of our Wi-Fi. It was real pain during some kind of business projects and stuff we'd have done in citizenship classes, because you'd be trying to kind of research products and stuff. It was absolute pain. But it also meant that content that wasn't acceptable or appropriate for kids, and even as we went on for young people in general, meant that we couldn't access pornography. There were always things that slipped through the cracks, but ultimately the view was there. The idea was that we would not be able to access such content.
On that point?
Give me a moment. And that's a good thing. I think we would all accept that that's a good thing. We're not going to start showing kids kind of, Twitter porn. That's generally a bad idea.
On that point?
No. And the idea that simply because it's written down on a page, I've already had to listen to him, Jonathan, so I'm not going to get to yours. The idea that it's simply written down on a page doesn't make it any more okay. For example, Bret Easton Ellis's one of the most incredibly famous books in the world, American Psycho, we wouldn't drop into, a primary 1 classroom. Because, and I accept Max's point about in terms of Mein Kampf, that if you checked out a certain book from the library, the teachers would sometimes come to you and go, listen, this is pretty heavy stuff. This is how you should probably try and interpret it. But with the likes of American Psycho, I've read it. Phenomenal piece of literature. But so many young men out there now are reading it, and the kind of grotesque sexual imagery and his unbelievable racism, the incredible levels of violence in there at the moment. Not every kid gets the talking to from a teacher because schools are under-resourced. And because that isn't always there. There isn't an instant pick up on these things by school librarians. I used to take out 4 or 5 books at a time. So that idea that that's what's going to happen, it's fanciful. And as pointed out by Ray in regards to Mein Kampf, these kinds of things happen. Kids get radicalised. And kids are being radicalised. It's actively no thank you. The idea that simply because it's written down it becomes okay, that's not how this works. It doesn't simply become okay because it's written down. There's a reason we block kids' internet access in schools. So they don't access dangerous pornography or videos of, we managed to get ISIS beheadings on our computers when we were young. We were pretty clever kids. But ultimately the school and the state tried to stop us getting access to ISIS beheadings. And I'll tell you, that shit will fuck you up. That is some serious stuff. There is nothing more scarring to a 12-year-old really than the sound of someone's head coming off. That's fucking scary. But we try. No, I'm not going to take a POI. Right? I'll listen. I might take some POIs later, but for the next minute or two, I'll tell you when. Okay. The idea that we would simply just open the floodgates, let all the 14-year-olds read American Psycho, or let them read Rest in Zero by Bret Easton Ellis, excellent book about addiction. But you know what else it does? It glorifies drug use. It glorifies using hard drugs like meth. And So if we simply allow this to kids, because in a school library it's not just the 17, 8-year-olds accessing these books. A 17-year-old might be able to understand Victor Nabokov's Lolita and understand that it's an unreliable author. But a 14-year-old can't, most of the time. Even I had a very high reading age, but even then, there were themes that a 14-year-old in the second year, 14-year-old and a 15-year-old are not going to pick up on. So why would we not attempt to restrict these things? And similarly, I mean, on the point about what we're dropping into kids' libraries in school, we had some seriously high-level books in my primary school that I shouldn't have had, and I can remember them. And I can remember I can remember specifically American Psycho being in our bookshelf. And that shouldn't have been allowed. It should have been banned from my school. Why? Because me, as an 11-year-old who liked Ben 10, Star Wars, and really wanted my mum to let me play Call of Duty, I maybe shouldn't have been allowed to read about a man raping and murdering people and how great he thought that was in his head. Max, you pointed out, in fact, you defined how a school should be a controlled learning environment. And I think that's an excellent definition of what schools should be. But the minute we just open the floodgates to anything and everything means that it isn't a controlled learning environment. We control their internet access for kids, so why wouldn't we do the same for their books? There shouldn't be a distinction between cinema, theatre, or online pornography and what is written down. Yes, you can't see it, but you can imagine. And, also, Tailte made the very interesting point about kind of the fact that teachers should be yes. In fact, you know what? I'm going to own it, Zach. I'm pro-censorship. I'll own it. I say this as the president of a society that has been fostering free speech and debate. No, thank you. Point of information, killer. I'm president of a society which has been fostering free speech for 175 years. And yes, Zach, I'm pro-censorship. Schools do not, as pointed out by Ray, do not have the resources, the ability, or sometimes the will or desire to tell kids that these are not appropriate books. So to suggest that kids can take that in, and to suggest any of that is unbelievably unfair, it's fanciful, and it's not a real description of what's happening in our schools. So really the points made so far on the opposition kind of fall moot, because that's not what's really happening. So ultimately I'm asking you here tonight, I'm not asking you to simply kind of go all with the wind and kind of just go, great, let's ban all the books. Let's not ban all the books. Let's ban certain books. Let's support government intervention to ban certain books in schools, not all books. Because ultimately, I would say in this case, when it comes to the government that has provided our curriculum for the best part of 100 years in our school system, that has led our education system, I would say in this case the government probably knows best, because it's elected by people that we put there. So vote your conscience, vote your country, protect our children from dangerous ideologies, and vote proposition. Thank you very much.
Now to close his opposition, I welcome Miss Ciara Swail.
So what world that the proposition has proposed tonight is something that I'm going to address, because the proposition thinks that in our world, schools would just be filled about books with porn, and they'd be filled with Mein Kampfs, and they'd be filled with absolutely all the God-forsaken things, that librarians would just go, you know what we need on our shelves? Mein Kampf. That's gonna really solve my existence, right? Because they think that what's going to happen in our world is that we're just gonna have all the porn in the bookshelves, and we're gonna have all of Mein Kampf, and etc., which is not realistically what's going to happen. Because realistically what's going to happen is, if a child, for example, who wants to access that material, as someone who wants to access that material, I am probably not going to go to my librarian and be like, hey, can you give me the porn book, please? Or can you give me the book that's really dodgy? Now, I recognise that school failed that individual, but what I will say is, what is more likely for someone to receive intervention they need in a topic? Going and picking out something at school where a teacher has to give them that book and hand it out to them and recognise that occurs, or them randomly online, going to going at every single message board, etc., etc. Do I say that schools are gonna get right 100% of the time? Absolutely not. What I'm saying is intervention is more likely in school than it is randomly on the internet. Now, and this is what we get to the crux of this issue, because the implementation of your policy is where things can go wrong. Because what happens is you have a law that's implemented for all the best intentions. It's happened in the States. Basically, they don't want content of sexual nature in schools. But because of this, schools are terrified of accidentally breaking this law, of getting their funding cut, of having organizations that exist in America, a first world country, to get as many books about puberty banned, as many books about racial issues banned, and as many books about LGBTQ issues banned. That there are organizations in America that exist, that are actively doing it to this day. Because a law was implemented with all the best intentions, but because they were so scared of accidentally breaking this law, they overcompensated. So that's why the seahorse example exists. That's why puberty books that were made for teenagers, banned, completely banned from schools. You can't access them in schools, even though they are educational bits of material that should be available to children. Yes, I'll take your point.
Thank you. Now, what do you say about a country's leader like Donald J. Trump banning books for the entire country?
Right, what I'm going to say is there is a difference between, and I really want to emphasize this, there is a difference in this debate about books that are just illegal in general, like I don't know how to make a bomb, that thing, and actively restricting access to certain information in our schools. That is a completely separate topic and a separate debate. Now, and that is what happens, that you eventually remove educational material from schools because the government in power does not believe in certain ideologies. Not because they're harmful to children, not because they are damaging to children, but because they don't believe in them.
On that point.
And no, shush. No, I'm not getting barked in this house now. So and that is what ends up happening, which is what's happening in the States. In the majority of the states in America, access to books about race, so not even about sex, about awful things that they're saying, have been restricted, heavily restricted. Or there's organizations that exist that barrage libraries and barrage schools to get these books removed. And I'm not even talking about really problematic books about race, I'm talking about things like To Kill a Mockingbird. That's famously banned from several states in America. I'm talking about books that we've all studied very actively and openly in our schools that are banned from US schools because certain people got into power that they went, no, we don't want these issues to be taught to our children. Even though, no, children, no. What, like for example, I'm gonna put this in perspective, because some people bring up the issue of, oh, as a parent, I should be allowed to make sure my kids don't have access to what I don't want them to. But the issue is, what about all the kids with parents that want them to have access to educational material? No, shush. No. I'm not taking any more POIs, I'm taking one. That's my rule. So for example, if I, was in school and I was a lesbian, let's pretend that for a second. And I had really religious parents who didn't want to talk about sexuality, who didn't want to teach me the things that I needed to know in my life.
Question?
No. And what if I went into the school, and I know I can't get information from my parents, I know that that's too risky, that the only way to learn anything about that is through the school library, is through trying to find refuge in knowing in trying to find information that should be available to me, but because of other people's ideologies it isn't.
On that point?
No, thank you. Because that's the issue. Because on both sides of the argument, we are exposing children to bad things. They cannot prevent a child going online and finding whatever they want if they so wish. We also can't prevent that. People are going to, in our world, people are going to have access to this material for school. What I'm saying is, I would rather my child encounter these ideas in a school setting where it's more likely, I'm saying that it's not going to work 100% of the time, but it's more likely that someone is going to intervene rather than the internet, where God knows what they'll read, or what they'll watch, or what they'll see. But what's a disadvantage that they have that we don't, is that you cannot deny, because it has happened in America, it has happened in several countries, you cannot prevent the fact that someone may get into power that may restrict access to books about race, books about gay issues, books that enrich our lives and enrich the lives of our students. That is a possibility you cannot get rid of, and that's why we win the argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Swail, and thank you to all our speakers for their excellent speeches this evening. We will now move to questions from the House. So, are there any questions for the proposition? Yes, there is. Question
for the question for the proposition, specifically second speaker. You spoke about how you entirely oppose sex education in particularly young ages, but the entire goal of sex education at those young ages is to prevent child sexual abuse, and it's been proven to be incredibly effective at doing so. So why do you oppose that?
Oh, let me be completely clear on my English. By the way, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have sex education for children at all. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't be teaching 4 or 5-year-olds about certain levels of sex education, and there should be some restrictions on that, and it should always be age appropriate. I hope that's clarified my viewpoint for you.
Opposition to respond?
That is my point. The proposition has been saying that in our world, librarians are just going to choose to put all the really inappropriate sex ed books in the children's section, which realistically isn't going to happen. Realistically, what's going to happen is if these books are available, they will be placed in their appropriate sections, and if no one takes them out, which is very common in libraries, that they will eventually be taken off the shelves through a process that's very common in libraries. This is not banning the books, by the way. If you're taking a second to go, oh, you're actually supporting the other side. No, I'm not. But that is realistically what would occur, essentially. That books would be placed with their respective sections, and that people can learn appropriate material for their ages. People aren't just going to put in, I don't know, how to do this position in the children's section just for the crack. And realistically, 5-year-olds aren't going to go to the library and be like, hey, can you please give me that book about having sex in that position, please? So realistically, the children won't be exposed to it. That's basically my 2 cents. Thank you.
As well, and I remind speakers, stand when you're responding. You don't want to. Sir.
Matthew Ciara. I have a question specifically for the gentleman in the middle. There's been a lot of stuff said tonight, and to be quite frank, it's not entirely true. Nigel Farage, Reform UK, banning books. Can you enlighten the House in Nigel Farage and Reform UK specific outline policy on banning books? Because I'm going to tell you now you can't, because it doesn't exist.
for one, tried to argue to me in good faith that Brash has never once in his entire life, or his political career certainly, lied or changed policy of his. And to be honest, this isn't just Brash. I think the modern Conservative Party as it currently stands is also likely to look into this in the future. I'm not saying it will, but it's certainly a possibility. But it's more or less a hypothetical point. It doesn't matter if Brash specifically is advocating for this, and I'll grant that he probably isn't. I'll grant that. But it doesn't stop other politicians who can attract a similar base. And again, I did point out in my issue, this isn't a right or left-wing issue. Left-wing governments have also been guilty of book banning. I think it's just as likely that we could see, again, not as a specific example of Corbyn, but someone of that ilk who starts targeting books on the other end.
Proposition to respond, and also if we start there in the political polemic, I will shut it down, just to be warned.
I mean, I don't remember Jeremy Corbyn saying he wanted to ban books in schools, or anyway, if it's stand-up book, anyway. Yeah, Farage never come out and said that, the Reform Code never had policy on that, it's kind of a fanciful idea. I think generally this idea is that, one, we haven't said ban all books everywhere, we've said ban certain books in schools. So that, it's kind of a point, really, like one kind of gets most of the opposition's point. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether or not Farage has said that he will or if he won't, or whether he lies or whether he doesn't, because it's rather irrelevant. It's ultimately a very minor party. So it's much like Claire Hanna coming out and saying that she's going to ban the SDLP from schools, or ban Christianity. It doesn't really mean much. They're minor politicians and they're a blip, and ultimately they haven't said that, so it doesn't really matter.
Thank you, sir. Are there now any abstaining questions that should be asked, or anything that can be directed to both sides equally? Yes, sir.
I think this debate probably is on the banning books in schools bit and not the government intervention, because there's very much a part of this debate where you can talk about who has the authority to ban books rather than the sort of the moral black or white binary of banning books. It's kind of straight out. So can each side kind of explain to me why either the government should or shouldn't, specifically the government, and if not the government who? Because realistically this comes down to the point that either the government bans the books or realistically the teachers ban the books, which is going to be a likelihood in the opposite case. So sort of why is one better than the other? Because the banning in some ways, or the restriction, is going to be inevitable. It comes down to the authority as to who has it. So why is one better than the other?
I'll ask the proposition to respond first.
I mean, ultimately, one, we all pay our tax, some of us do. And people know how to do, but we all pay our tax to the government. Then they pay for our schools. None of the funding methods are complicated. Largely, the government has the money they give to school. They provide the curriculum. They provide most of the safeguarding policy, or at least the guidelines on safeguarding policy. A lot of the hiring in terms of how teachers are allocated and stuff. As far as I'm concerned, in Northern Ireland, because Kieran talked all about the US much once, but we focus this together in the UK, so I'm going to go deeper into Northern Ireland. Most of our schools are in some way connected to religious organisations, whether that's the Catholic Church, whether that's other churches, or kind of church bodies. And I think that I'd much rather the government, which is elected by the people, should be for the people, but is even in Northern Ireland is largely based off of the establishment politics. I'd rather they would ask for taking control of the censorship than say the Catholic Church, not a big fan. But so ultimately, if someone's going to do censoring in terms of books, which is always going to happen, I'd say the government. I'd much rather the government are doing it than Catholic Church or the Methodist Church or whatever mood our school librarian was in. Because our school librarian was horrible, really, really horrible. And I wouldn't want her to know what books I had to buy. Because at least I voted for them and I paid them in tax.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask the opposition to respond, and also, unexpectedly, if we veer into religious polemic, I'll also shut that. Opposition, Ms. Swail.
Because we all know that our government absolutely represents what we want and has always done, act in our best interests, and has never just done things because they didn't want to do them or they just didn't believe in what they were doing. Like, for example, this is a great example of why your example falls completely flat. In Northern Ireland, for years, it was democratically agreed that democratically we all wanted access to gay marriage. But for years, our government blocked it, despite democratic demand, because that party did not agree on it. So that's the issue at hand. That I don't want, because the teachers restricting access to books is going to happen on both of our sides, right? The problem is, on their side, what you have the possibility of is people going into power. That's happened in the States, it's happened here. So, I am talking about here actually, using America as the example because they're doing it widely, God forbid. Now, you have the possibility of someone getting into power that doesn't like gay rights, that doesn't want people to learn about racial issues. That's why in America critical race theory is banned in schools, basically talking about race. That is a possibility on their side, not on ours. That's why we win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swail. I would like to wrap the meeting up as close to or shortly thereafter 9 as possible. So we'll have one lightning round of questions and that'll be it. So
we need powder for the wine.
yeah, here and I. Well, then we will not have a lightning round of questions. We will not have a lightning round of questions. The actual president has so decreed. So thank you very much, fellow speakers. I particularly appreciate the fact that we learned that Mr. Hoy is anti-murder and Mr. Hamill is pro-censorship. Interesting. I'd like to extend on behalf of the society my thanks to the English Society for a sterling turnout this evening, and I would also like to extend my personal sincere thanks to the Council of the Society for inviting me back and giving me this chance to remember when I wasn't a corporate slave.
That's why I'm still good.
Can I keep the gown, sir? So, there we go. It is time. Oh, and also congratulations to Miss Schools Commuter for being the first person to notify me that she won the bingo this evening. So it was a joint effort.
What was the bingo? I didn't know there was bingo.
Spot the person who didn't read their order paper. Okay, so it's time to move this meeting to a close. This is the vote on speaker ability. This is not your personal thoughts on the motion. This is which side you believe spoke best this evening. So, are you ready, Mr. Secretary? There we go. That's why I asked. I now have to install. Did I take any other notes? Yes, I will remind the House at this point that on Monday, Stephen Flynn, MP, is speaking in this room.
Yeah.
In this room, come at like 7?
7:30.
7:30. Come along to that. On Tuesday, there's the intern meeting in PFC at 6:30. I presume there will be signs or something because the PFC is a blooming maze. And Thursday, it's the festive stuff. I don't know what that means, but it's something at Lavery's, and it's at what time?
Be here at 7.
Be here at 7.
Where are we going after this?
And after this, we're going also to Lavery's. So yes, come on to that. No alcohol drinking required. But yes, I cannot ad-lib to save my life. So, all those who would like to vote in favour of the motion, i.e. that the proposition spoke best, please raise your membership cards and say aye! Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 3, 4. Yes, 10. All those who would like to vote against the motion for the opposition, please raise your membership card and say nay! Nay. If I get membership. And all those who would like to abstain on the motion, please raise your membership cards and say meh. 1, 2, 3. You can't do that. Too late. 4. Mr. Secretary, could you please read back the results of the vote?
For the vote of speaker ability, there were 10 votes for the proposition, 6 votes for the opposition, and 4 abstentions. That's the proposition carried over the speaker ability.
The proposition has it! The proposition has it! Ladies, gentlemen, one and all, it has been a great pleasure. I do hereby read the time to be 8 1976. So, Mr. Secretary, I do hereby declare this meeting adjourned.
Mr. Vice President, if I can say a moment more, I'm president again, so I can.
But the meeting's adjourned.
I think on behalf of the council and the wider society and myself, we'd like to extend our thanks to you, Mr. Acting President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To the pub! Take it to the front for a photo.